Still waiting for a big smile out of you. You're up 2-0. What's the story? Are you not happy, or you're only half happy, or?
Still to be happy about.
You're up 2-0.
Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so.
Is this a rivalry? Or is it just a coincidence? Is it just a coincidence that at the time when Andy is sizzling hot, Eric is just warm? Or is this a true fantasy rivalry? Is it a real battle between two fantasy owners? If Eric loses, he becomes the new Paul. He becomes the team that puts together 4 to 5 successful regular seasons, including MVPs, consecutive MVPs for Paul, and consecutive MVPs for Eric. He becomes the new team that's only able to win one championship out of all those years. Paul, of course, winning in 2016 and Eric winning in 2020. Is this a rivalry? If Andy loses, he fails to win 3 championships in a row. Doesn't hurt that much. He's won 3 over the last 4. But you see, Andy wants to be unique. Andy wants to stand out. Not 3, not 4, not 5. And up until this point, all he's done is win 3 out of 4. That's the only thing that he's been able to accomplish that no one else has. But I have 3 championships, and Jay's won 2 consecutive championships. If Andy fails to beat Eric this weekend, he essentially becomes Iron Man, twisting and turning on the jets, and Jarvis, and punching, and all this, only to be met by a underwhelming response from Thanos. All this for a drop of blood. Oh, whoa. This is your championship prediction or preview or whatever you would like to consider this. Bundy here, you there. We have our matchup. We have Ewok Rape versus Guylander. And just a couple of minutes before I started recording this, I also considered another possibility that could be at hand here. If Guylander loses to Eric, one thing that you can definitely be sure of, and I think everybody in the league will agree with me when I say this, if Eric wins, you're not getting any Champs Only episodes next year. Andy is only here to talk his shit at a time when he is successful. Andy will not be here 3 to 4 years from now when he is 3 to 4 years removed from his championship and at the present moment in week 6 is 2-4. He's not going to agree to record anything with Eric because this is not about conversation. This isn't about the wonder of the league. This is only to posture. It's only to sit there and contemptuously discuss the league, which of course is a component of doing recaps, but you have to be here when you're eating shit, when you're eating crow. And if Eric wins, we only got like about 5 to 6 episodes this year from Champs Only. Next year, you'd be lucky to get 3. So, of course, last night, Guylander had David Njoku for his tight end, right? So David Njoku scores 11 points. Let's just mention that. Good for Andy. As we've mentioned in the chat, David Njoku looked like he was about to put together a 40-point performance. Thank God he wasn't able to do that. And before I get into anything, Andy, how dare you? How dare you in 2023 still say the lame ass shit? And I think it's only you that's ever said this. I don't think anybody's ever been back and forth and talking fantasy trash in a scenario that includes Eric and I. And if I preferred Eric to win, I think you're the only person that's ever said you're rooting for your brother. Come on, man. Don't you have any competitive spirit at all? Don't you understand that this has nothing to do with family? No one cares. This may be something that you're saying, maybe in a disingenuous way, and I understand that that's what you're saying, if that's what it is. But if you truly, truly believe that I want Eric to win because he's my brother, then you don't get anything, sir. You don't know what any of this is about. So that's lame. These two, of course, have met earlier in the season. They tied up 100-100, a tie that could have only been accomplished because of Team Bundy's advocacy of kickers. Eric getting a 6-point kick in that week, so you're welcome. So here they are today. Andy at 11-2-1 and Eric at 9-4-1, both division winners. Eric the MVP, Andy the highest winningest team in the league. Team with most wins, okay? We've discussed many times not to discredit Andy, to take away anything from what he has done, but to be real about the sort of season that he's had. He's had a season in which he's won 11 games, but if we track back all of the weeks, Andy, yesterday when I listened to the Champs Only, said, because this has all been luck. It hasn't all been luck. But to be quite honest with you, about 4 weeks were genuine fantasy victories and 8 weeks were luck, if we want to be real. But none of that matters. You see, that's the beauty of all of this. It's my word against yours, and words don't mean shit when it comes to championships. So it's up to you to shut us all up. That's the beauty of all this, Andy. Shut us up or be discredited forever. So let's start off with Andy's team here, and I have what I believe to be Andy's starting lineup. Patrick Mahomes in the quarterback position. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk of Matthew Stafford. Maybe Andy is playing him. I think at this juncture, it would make sense if Andy chose to play Matthew Stafford. But I will say this. The idea of throwing in 3 players in one game, of course, they're facing the Giants. The Giants' defense isn't great, but it's not terrible. It's not the Washington defense. We'll get to the Washington defense. It's not the Arizona defense. We'll get to the Arizona defense. It's not that terrible. I wouldn't be so trusting of Matthew Stafford, Kyren Williams, and Puka Nacua to go off in the finals. I wouldn't trust that. Now, it's interesting to track these 2 players because they both had bye weeks in Week 10, Matthew Stafford and Patrick Mahomes. Since Week 11, Matthew Stafford has 117 points, 15 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Since Week 11, Patrick Mahomes has 91 points, 9 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. So again, 117 versus 91, 15 touchdowns versus 9, and 2 interceptions versus 6. Advantage goes to Matthew Stafford, but the matchup that Patrick Mahomes has, he's going against Cincinnati, 23rd against quarterbacks. What are the chances that Kansas City finally understands who they are and just run regular plays, play actions, little screens here and there, no trick plays, and Patrick Mahomes gets 3 touchdowns with 315 yards? It's very possible against the Cincinnati defense. Matthew Stafford can't run. He's no threat with his legs. So I believe Andy will start Patrick Mahomes. In his running back position, Kyren Williams, of course. Chuba Herbert will be the other running back. I don't think he can trust Aaron Jones against the Minnesota defense. Aaron Jones had a great game last week, 21 carries, 127 yards, and it's just one reception. He had 12 total points. Javonte Williams, absolutely not. Maybe the Denver offense will be reignited now that Russell Wilson has been benched, but you can't trust him. And Ty Chandler had a touchdown in the red zone with 8 carries and just 17 yards last week against Detroit Lions. He is facing the Green Bay Packers. So I believe that Chuba Herbert will be Andy's running back. You see, you have to speculate with Andy. You got to do all this guessing because Andy wants to do this. And I only did this last week because Andy does it. Puka Nacua in the wide receiver slot, Deebo Samuel as the other wide receiver, of course, David Njoku with the 11 points last night. And the flex position, Andy does have the option of starting Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen wouldn't be a wise decision. You don't know what his volume is going to be. What is going to happen if the game is a blowout by halftime? Is Keenan Allen going to play? He will not play with the Chargers next year, so you have to wonder what his volume is going to be. I think Andy is going to go with Tyreek Hill. He has to go with Tyreek Hill. He's matchup proof. Just because he's facing the Baltimore Ravens, I think Andy left him out last week because he was questionable, but you have to play him, Andy. He is projected to get 13 points. Let's see how much Keenan Allen is projected to get 9. There's no way you don't start Tyreek Hill. So Andy's team will be Mahomes, Kyren Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Puka Nacua, Deebo Samuel, David Njoku, Tyreek Hill, the Raiders defense. Now, here's what's interesting about the Raiders defense. Michael Pittman Jr. is going to play. He was full-time in practice yesterday, so he's going to get the start. He didn't play last week. He is that offense. I know they do have Jonathan Taylor. Sometimes Zach Moss goes off, but Michael Pittman Jr. is the offense. So there's a lot of confidence starting the Raiders. They have put together 3 really good weeks, scoring 12 against Minnesota, just giving up 3 points there. Of course, there was the Thursday night massacre against the Chargers, 21 points given up, a 25-point total, and just giving up 14 points this past week against the Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs. So maybe Andy was observing the Raiders, and he said, oh, okay, I've got an opportunity here. Here's the thing about starting defenses, of teams that aren't necessarily winning teams, though I do know that the Raiders are pretty impressive this year. After you walk away from their 3 points that they've given you, you kick yourself in the head because you trusted the Raiders. Same thing happens with the Giants. It happened several times this year to Paul. Happened to me one time when I trusted the Giants. But when you trust these teams and they give you the sort of performances that they normally give up, you end up kind of kicking yourself in the head. But look, this was a better choice than Andy putting the Dolphins defense against the Cowboys last week. And it's certainly a lot better than putting them against the Baltimore Ravens in the championship week. So Andy making the better decision with the Raiders defense. Andy has Jake Elliott. So let's move on to Ewok Rape. Jalen Hurts against the Arizona Cardinals. That's a pretty good matchup there. How many touchdowns will he get? Of course, there's the inevitability, there's that word again, of the tush push. There is, Jalen Hurts running in several touchdowns and maybe getting a few touchdowns by halftime. Maybe he sits down. There's always that reality of these good teams, as I said, not allowing their players to play in the fourth quarter. Christian McCaffrey against the Washington Generals. The advantage of the running backs goes to Eric, not just because it's Christian McCaffrey, but both of them are going to eat. Kyren Williams is going to eat against the Giants because they will most likely be ahead. And McCaffrey is going to eat against the Commanders. Did I call them the Generals? I've called them the Generals several times this year. Is there a difference between the Generals and the Commanders? I don't think there is. The advantage goes to McCaffrey because the likelihood of McCaffrey getting 2 touchdowns, like he scored 36 points against the Arizona Cardinals. When it's those really weak defenses, he goes off for, a couple red zone scores, over 100 yards, and he only had 18 carries in that game, by the way. I think those points are going to be a lot harder to come by against the Giants against the Giants defense for Kyren Williams. Unfortunately for Eric, he has to trust Kenneth Walker III. I believe he would have started Ramondre Stevenson against the Buffalo Bills. I think, even though he has the Bills defense, maybe he would have looked for a different defense. Let's see. Kenneth Walker III has been very inconsistent. He had an injury week 12 and week 13. Before that, he wasn't that strong, really. He has a couple of 1-point performances. Let's see, week 14, he had 5 points. He had a 16 against the Philadelphia Eagles in that exciting comeback game. And just last week, he had just 5 against the Tennessee Titans. In his flex position, he has Gus Edwards, who at this point I would think would be much more capable of putting up points than Kenneth Walker III. But Walker is going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who aren't a great defense. But if you have the passing attack of Geno Smith, you have Jackson and Jigba, you have DK Metcalf, there's a possibility for Kenneth Walker III to eat. It is there. So maybe he could put up over 10 points. Here's what I want to mention about these Rams wide receivers. Eric with Cooper Kupp and Andy with Puka Nacua. Cooper Kupp returned in week 5. Since then, he's only had 4 double-digit games. In week 5 versus the Eagles, scoring 11. In week 6 against the Arizona Cardinals, scoring 20. In week 14 versus the Baltimore Ravens, 17. And in week 15, scoring 17 again against the Saints. In those weeks, these are Puka Nacua's scores. Week 15, 13, 71 yards, and a touchdown. Week 6, 2 points. Week 14, 8 points. And week 15, 5 points. So this is not to say that Matthew Stafford chooses one over the other. We've seen countless plays of Cooper Kupp not being able to catch the ball in the end zone. But it's interesting. It's very interesting that when Cooper Kupp gets over 10 points, Puka Nacua doesn't do much. What's going to be the scenario here? See, this is how I'm thinking about this game, and this may be the most important game. I don't believe that it's going to be the 49ers against the Commanders with Andy starting Deebo Samuel and Eric starting McCaffrey. I think this is going to be the important game because it has to be one of them eating. This has to be one of them eating, and then by halftime, it's 24-7. It's 30 to something, and then everything tapers off in the third quarter, and then fourth quarter, everybody sits. That's how you figure this is going to go. I mean, this could be 14-14 at the start of the fourth quarter, but I don't see both eating like that. 17 on the other side, 8 on the other side. It's possible, but it's also possible that one of them could get 2 catches for 26 yards, and Kyren Williams scores 2 red zone touchdowns. So touchdowns are going to be very hard to come by in this game. There's only one ball here. This is going to be the big game that's going to decide the chip, in my opinion. And by the way, this will all be decided before the ball drops on New Year's, as the last game here is going to be, let's see, Eric's last game is the 4 p.m., the 4:05 p.m. of Kenneth Walker. So most of Eric's team will be going out at 1 o'clock. He has the Saturday game with Jake Ferguson. I'll get to Jake Ferguson in a second. But for Andy, the last game, well, he's got Ty Chandler in that game with Green Bay. So Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. Again, I doubt Andy will start Ty Chandler or Aaron Jones, but I was doubting Ty Chandler last week and he started him. But my assumption is that it will also be a 4 o'clock game, the 4:25 game with Patrick Mahomes. So this is all going to be over before 8 p.m. on Sunday. The victor will have a full 4 hours to cry his eyes out before the ball drops. Now, Jake Ferguson is someone that Eric needs to step up. That 11 by David Njoku last night is more than Ferguson's done on average over the last 2 months. His best performance over the past 2 months is a 13. He's got a couple threes. He's got a couple fours these last 2 weeks. He hasn't been doing much. And the thing is, he's been getting receptions. He's gotten 6 catches several times. He's gotten 5 catches. These are good targets for, these are good receptions for a tight end. You figure one of them might be a red zone, you know. Jake Ferguson has to get something in order for Eric to put together a victory here, because I don't see these games being ridiculously scoring games. I do think that there will be a couple of slots here that are going to put up some comical numbers. In my opinion, I think the more comical numbers will be on Eric's side, with Mike Evans here against the New Orleans Saints. That's a rivalry that's always up. Last time against the Saints, he was only able to put together 3 catches with 4 points. But I believe Mike Evans got hurt in that game. Did he not? Was it him or was it Lattimore that got hurt in that game? Those two, they have like a symbiotic relationship. One of them gets injured and the other one feels it somehow. Was Mike Evans hurt in that game? Just 3 catches, 40 yards for 4 points. But that is a true rivalry, and I expect Mike Evans to get it in. Gus Edwards against the Miami Dolphins. Eric has to start Gus Edwards here, who the last 2 weeks has been doing Gus Edwards things. He's been the same Gus Edward that he was in the middle of the season. Week 7, week 8, week 9. If Eric can get that sort of output, then this game is really over. 20 points in week 7, 27 in week 8 against the Arizona Cardinals, the punching bag of the league, and 17 against the Seahawks the week after that. So 12 points these 2 past weeks for Gus Edwards. They include red zone touchdowns. They have to include red zone touchdowns. The last thing here for Eric, his kicker. One thing that you always have to be aware of is, what's the weather gonna be in my game with my kicker? They play in New England. I don't know what the weather is going to be. Could I even look something like that up? Let's see. Nah, I'm not going to check that. Fuck that. Eric should be the one to check that out, but that's something that you should be aware of. Is Tyler Bass an automatic start? Is any kicker an automatic start? This is all situational. What kickers get the most opportunities? Jake Elliott didn't do much for Andy in the prior weeks, but last week he got a 17 versus me, so you don't know what's going to happen. But if it's a rainy game, if it's maybe a snowy game, which is, that's not that likely in December. If it's a snowy game, then what are the chances that Tyler Bass is going to get kicks? It's not very likely. So that's about it. These are the matchups. These are the scenarios. Eric has the strength in quarterback. Jalen Hurts is a much better quarterback, fantasy quarterback, than Patrick Mahomes or Matthew Stafford. And his matchup is a lot better. Let's see, Matthew Stafford, I believe the Giants are the 17th against quarterbacks. So Jalen Hurts having a much better matchup here. And look, of course, I'm very biased. I'm extremely biased because I want nothing more than there to be a 3 championship split between Andy, Eric, and I. If I am weighing in the 2 consequences here, on one hand, you have Eric finally being able to tell me to go fuck myself and saying, hey, I've got 3 championships as well. And then you got Andy on the other side saying, hey, I got more championships than all of you, and I got a 3-peat, something that no one's ever done. Andy, how could you ever even disingenuously say that I'm rooting for my brother? You know what's at hand here, Andy? You had the chance to make history. You think this has anything to do with my fucking brother? If it was Joe, if it was the commish, if it was Paul, if it was Ed, I would want Ed to get the victory over you. If it was anybody, Eric is just there. Eric is just a vessel that's going to carry that belt out of the Bronx and transfer it to the mean streets of Staten Island. So of course I'm biased when I say all this, but I do believe that Eric is going to get the victory. Not just because of the Jalen Hurts and the Christian McCaffrey, but I think the supporting cast is going to be better than Andy's. What are the chances that Chuba Herbert gets in there for another touchdown? Chuba Herbert puts up some weeks with single-digit performances. It's not a given that he's going to score a touchdown. The Raiders against the Colts. Is it a given that the Raiders are going to score over 10 points again? Of course, Eric has the Bills against the New England Patriots. That's not a gimme either. I played against the Patriots last week with the Denver Broncos, but it wasn't a horrible game either. It's not like the Patriots are going to light the town up. So if the Buffalo Bills get off to a strong lead, what are they going to be able to do on defense? How does that open up their playbook? How are they going to be able to stop Bailey Zappi? Is it going to be an easier process if they're ahead? And speaking of the Buffalo Bills, Gabe Davis on the bench. This looks like a great week for Gabe Davis to get 3 touchdowns, huh? Gabe Davis with 19 points, 130 yards last week on 4 catches. Predicting what Gabe Davis is going to do, it's like you got to be like fucking Ponce Phil. Gotta be a fucking groundhog or something to be able to predict what he's gonna do. So, gentlemen, I really have no prediction here because I'm too invested in Andy's failure. I'm way too invested in Andy's failure. I want Eric to win. I want Eric to get the victory. And of course, with that will be the death of the Champs Only podcast. Andy's only goal is just to talk shit. It's not to discuss the happenings of the league from week to week. If next year Eric wins this year and next year it's week 10 and Andy is 4-6, Eric, don't even text Andy. You're not getting an episode from Andy. And I think that's what I really want from this. I really want that to be affected. I really want to see how that's gonna change the dynamic of the show. Andy has to continue to do it because Eric did it with Andy being the consecutive winning championship, and Eric had to eat shit and come there and do the show with him. So Andy's gonna have to bear that. And I think more than anything, that's what I like to see. I want to see the physical manifestation of this failure. So, by 8 or 9 p.m., of course, it could be some overtime games. By 8 or 9 p.m., Sunday, December 31st, we will know who is the champion. Will it be Ewok Rape or Guylander? Is this a rivalry or is it just a coincidence?